This is Dr. Norbert calling you from a very frosty England, and I welcome everybody to this very special panel discussion that I've put together to help us discuss where we're going with the Marvel Crisis Protocol TTS leagues. We're at a bit of a crossroads right now. The season 9 is just about to end, and we had a whole new season ahead of us to think about in 2023. On top of that, we've had Malekith changed, and we've had a huge change in the game by the introduction of a whole bunch of different new crises, which is going to completely shift things around. So this is like the perfect time, I think, to take stock of where we've been and where we're going, not only with the actual game. We're not going to talk about the game so much, but actually what has been the role of the TTS leagues, and what should they be going forward. For everybody out there, there is a survey going on right now. Everyone in the community is welcome to go ahead and take this survey and give us your thoughts about what the TTS League should be. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat just now. Oops, that's not the right thing. I have to find it. I'll find that. That's not the right. That's the link to the season finals. I'll find the link for the league for the survey in a minute. But at the same time, whilst that survey was going on, I wanted to also get on some of the people who have been really prominent in the community and also been playing in the leagues either a lot in the past or all the way through to the future. So let me have each of them in turn introduce themselves, and I will call out the names so that we don't get confused. So let's start with somebody all the way in the Mountain Time Zone, very early, Mike DeLuca from the Danger Room podcast. Go ahead, Mike, and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am on Danger Room. If you listen there, you hear me talk a lot. I talk on Discord a lot as well. Yeah, I've been playing this game for a couple years now. I started in like September 2020, I believe, and I played in the leagues. I took a little bit of a time off from the leagues. This since the summertime. This last two, the last one I skipped out on.
Just the last one.
Yeah, yeah, just the last one. And then I traveled to a lot of events in the U.S. I've had pretty good success with those, and having a great time with doing the pod stuff lately. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you, Mike. So let's go
Mhm.
down to the Central Time Zone. We'll start with Sooner5.
Yeah, how's it going? I've been playing MCP. I think so. It came out in November of I can't even remember what year. What
2019, before the pandemic, just before the
2019.
pandemic. Yep.
Yeah, so I started about February of 2020. So I started about 4 months after the game came out. So I've been playing almost since it started. So long time. I'm one of the OGs.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been playing for a long time. I've played in every TTS league except this past season, season 1 all the way up to I think season 8. I just took this last season off. I'm on the Gamers Guild podcast. Used to be on Turn Zero, but we kind of Todd and Chris kind of stopped playing the game, so that went away, and I joined Nate and the guys at Gamers Guild. So I'm currently doing that.
Cool. Great. Speaking of that, let's move to the Eastern Time Zone in the United States with a very, I'm going to wager to say hungover, Nate. Hello, Nate.
Hello, guys. Good morning.
Good morning. Tell us a little bit about your MCP experience and how much you've been playing in the leagues, or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of got lucky and was in on the ground floor at the reveal of MCP at Gen Con in August of 2019, and was kind of hooked ever since then. So I've been playing for quite a while in that respect. I played in TTS leagues 2 through 4, so some of the earlier ones, and then pump the brakes on it a little bit as had a kid and some other time commitments came up.
Yep. Okay, and that people can find you on the Gamers Guild podcast and videocast, right?
Yep, over on YouTube and wherever you can find podcasts and stuff.
Perfect. Okay, joining me then on the GMT time zone here in the European bracket, all the way up in the, I think, even frostier part of the United Kingdom than I'm in right now, it's Liam Watt. Say hello, Liam.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, it's Still snowing here, unfortunately. I've been playing since last October, I think, is when Dormammu dropped. He was the thing that brought me into the game. I've been playing the TTS League since then, Season 6. I just had one game before it on TTS, then just jumped straight in and started playing.
Yeah.
And played every season up till then, so up to 9. And then you can contact me on, obviously, Discord, or I'm on Twitter at Liam Adam Watt as well, if anyone wants to talk on the Twitter.
Perfect. Yeah, and you're very, very generous with your time, giving out advice and stuff like that. So it's great.
Yeah.
Pisho should mention you're being very modest. You have also made it into the finals for the leagues a couple times, which is one of the reasons why, despite not having a podcast of some kind, you're here on the panel discussion.
I'm on a podcast, just not an MCP podcast, so that's kind of.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
If anyone wants any Age of Sigmar chat, then they can come see me, I suppose.
Ooh, we should probably catch up later. As for me, I've been playing as well. Upon release, I had my first demo game by the great Pat Dunford, and then promptly got everything shut down just after that demo game. But it was great because TTS started happening. We discovered collectively in London, we discovered the league halfway through Season 1. So we didn't participate in Season 1, but then we participated in, including myself, Season 2. I did a number of leagues. I also then organized a bunch of the leagues. I was head organizer for 2 seasons. Then I think I took 1, maybe 2 seasons off, and then I've been playing in the last couple as well because I've been streaming games, and that's been a lot of fun to try to help bring the game to new people. Right. Okay. So the question here is, we're at a crossroads with the game. I've talked about that at the top of the show, but we're also at a crossroads with the league because the league has been going pretty much the same way from seasons 2, maybe probably 3 till now. And the question I have for the group here is, ultimately, we're trying to decide what we should be doing next to make sure that we still adapt the league to the needs of the community. That's the whole point of this, is to have the global community be able to play this together, and we want to find the best way to do that. So what I'd like to do is explore a little bit with the group here. What do you think was the league's purpose at first, and how was that evolved into what we got in 2022? Who would like to go first?
I can start, I guess.
Sure.
So the league's purpose to start was very easy, right? It was like pandemic, no one can go to the shop, can still game. I think AMG was very grateful for that. It kept their game alive. I think the game is probably just dead otherwise.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much a no-brainer as like why it existed and grew that way. In terms of, are we asking like what it should be now?
What do you think it's changed into now? Because I think, Mike, it's a good question because pandemic's over, cons are happening, local game shops are happening, but the league is getting maybe a little long in the tooth, perhaps. So where do you think it's sat in 2022?
I think it's still just like an online event, right? Like an online tournament. There's still a lot of people who, like Liam, just like can't go to the game store, I guess, or it's too far or something, or I don't know, he was joking about that. And there's also people who just like don't have a competitive outlet in like their local scene. The league offers that for them, or people just want to get more games in. I think it's mostly like an accessibility thing, but it's also been like a highly competitive event up until this point. I mean, it still is, right? So
we'll come to that. Actually, that's a very good question to ask later. Nate, let's go to you because you have a very casual. I mean, you play competitively, but you has a very fun factor in mind. Based on what I see on your podcast or video casts, tell us what you think it was and what it is now. The leagues.
Yeah, so I think Mike already hit it on the head on both accounts pretty well. The league, I mean, I think it was always going to exist because the ability to easily access it online for somebody who maybe wants a demo of the game or anything like that was just such a great outlet for a game that, for all intents and purposes, launched into a pandemic, unfortunately, and really kept the heart beating for MCP, which is a big deal. And as the league has grown and just kind of over time, as we're finally able to get back to conventions and game stores and stuff, I think it's a big accessibility thing for those who aren't easily able to make it to a game store or don't have a local game store. But I also think it's one of those things that has become kind of a pillar of the competitive MCP scene.
Okay, Sooner, you've been at the start, so you've seen the rainbow of changes over time. Can you give us a little, in broad strokes, what's it been like at the start compared to what you see now?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, kind of the same, except just grown in size. You know, it's always kind of been a tournament that people, competitive players flock to kind of prove their mettle. Um, it's like Mike said, I think one of the biggest things is its accessibility. You can just hop on and play. People like that they can just get a game in at night without going to the store once a week. Everybody loves going to the store, and that's ideal, but there's all kinds of life issues that don't let you get there. So, it just basically started out as a smaller tournament. I think the first year we had like 35 people or something like that.
Right.
And it was as competitive then as it is now. I mean, I remember in my first season, I played Morgan Reed. I played, I think, one of the Foss brothers, Travis Foss. So it was just as brutal as it is now. And those people have just continued to play. And the best thing about it, and I think we'll kind of find this and talk about it later, is it is competitive, and it's probably the up until recently, it is certainly the main competitive event in MCP, but it's also a casual event, and it's really good for casual players. So it does a good job mixing both. Um, but it's really just grown and grown and grown, and I mean, I think it's really thought of as the main competitive event in MCP.
Yeah. Okay. I should mention Sooner being taking us through a little history there. The Danger Room has a really nice three-part series of podcasts about the history of the game. I guess they evenly split it between the three episodes, so I encourage you to go listen to that if you want to hear a bit about how this game's evolved rather quickly. And I should say to a pace that keeps it with lively without being overwhelming. You know. Liam, I think you said you play mostly because of the fact that you're more isolated from real life games. Is that correct?
So like it's seen as being like a cost thing as well. Like you could, like my local person that I could play is about probably a half an hour drive away from me. That's an hour journey there and back.
Right.
I could get on my laptop, open up, and we can play then 2 games in that time that I would only go over for 1 game sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is currently, and that's kind of like I play with a guy down south, and we play like 3-4 times a week.
You're right.
And then I couldn't do that with him because we're like easily 200 miles apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's your access there, sort of thing. Like you say, I guess the biggest thing, and that's one of the things I like with the league is there's many people in the European bracket I would never meet, probably because I don't go to like England events or obviously in European events as much. But you get to obviously have a chance to catch up with these people that all love the game probably for probably similar reasons that you do, and that's kind of on that sort of side. Like you say, the accessibility is a lot easier to just like you say clip open your laptop and
Yeah. So
play.
let's stay on that point, Liam, with you. One of the criticisms that we get occasionally up on the Discord, there's a TTS Discord for the MCP leagues as well. If you all want to join, I'll get that link up in a minute. But one of the things is that there's this constant debate: are the leagues competitive or are they casual? And I'd like to get I have an opinion as a TO about how that is, but I'd like to get your players' opinion about it because you're a finalist. You've been a finalist a couple times, clearly competitive, but you just said you need it for casual purposes as much. But what do you think the leagues are?
I think they're both. I think like it's because of this the Swiss system. If you, I think there's also a thing with Mal getting nerfed slightly as well. It means you maybe won't meet him at the lower tables. But I think normally an event, even if you go to a real life event, game one you might verse one of the normal top players. Game two you might just play against someone that just unluckily lost to another top player, but they're still good. Then when you hit game 3, 4, 5, 6, you might just be. That's when you're just then casually playing more fun lists. Well, fun lists. It's but the eye of the beholder sort of thing, isn't it? But the casual side, where people are trying to create a story or a cinematic game is then maybe more at that end. But again, I didn't come into this game looking for cutthroat competitive. It's just obviously in my nature that you want to hone your skills, be better, known for then appraised for playing well to yourself as well. Like you say, like getting better is obviously a thing if you want to play a long term in a game, or you just play the story narrative sort of side,
Yeah.
which is available.
I have a very odd view about playing casually. For me, I like to play. It's not like I'm trying to be super competitive, but I don't have a lot of time to play, and so I want to just play the game as is, like to the level of a competition. So all the like not like fun rules, like narrative. I'm not saying those are bad. It's just like I play so little. I want to kind of get the basic game down, and so those are the games that I tend to favor. But let's go to Mike. Mike, you're very successful on the real life circuit. You've been doing well in the leagues in the past. Do you consider it a casual affair or is it strictly competitive?
I agree with Liam that I would say it's both. I think the cuts is absolutely like a cutthroat competitive environment. Obviously, you have to be successful in the Swiss to get to that point, which encourages being competitive in the Swiss of people that want to be in that event. But I have never heard any person who tries to take the game like at a lighter pace, more casually, if you will, complain that the league is too competitive. Usually, I hear from the competitive players that the league is too competitive.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's just Liam had brought it up. That's the nature of like a Swiss event. The farther you go in the Swiss, the more it adapts to like your play level. Just by nature of like the win loss and strength of schedule things that it has going on. As far as where it should be, I think it does a pretty good job now that the lock lists are removed. It's a bit. I know it's been a bit of a bummer for the content creators. It's like we don't have the big like what are people playing articles and stuff like that. So I think this last season has slept under the radar a little bit. But I think there's some solutions we could apply that would make it exciting still.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll come on to about that. I do actually miss the data because I thought, well, let me say this. I thought the data in the beginning games when we were in the pandemic was super important for the lifeblood of the game. It helped people talk about the game. I dare say the developers maybe have been using that information themselves to try to figure out what's going on with their own game because it was the major source of it. And we don't have that anymore if we have open rosters. And that is one of the questions on the survey, is whether people feel that's important enough to keep or not. So thanks for bringing it up, Mike. Let's go to Nate. Nate, you promote fun on your, you have a channel that's meant to be about accessibility to all kinds of players, but particularly I think new ones as well. Do you think that casual players feel uncomfortable playing the leagues now?
I don't think uncomfortable is a word to describe it at all. I think, all in all, as you guys have already mentioned, if you're able to get through those first two rounds, you are, for the most part, out of the Shark Tank, and then you can more games that are probably at the level you were looking for if you were a newer or more casual player. So, as a whole, I agree. I think that the league is both competitive and also casual in its nature. I do also feel like there is a bigger emphasis on the competitive scene, mostly because we as content creators and stuff focus more on the competitive side of the league with constant kind of posts about, I guess, the rosters and all that kind of stuff, but then also with the emphasis on some of the stream games for the top cut and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the attention goes on the competitive side, and it's what talked about on the podcast. And so it feels like it's the more visible side of the league. It may give the wrong impression to someone.
Yeah, I think that could be a fair way to put it as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, Sooner, what about your local group? Let's take it, make it real for a change. What's preventing them from playing in the leagues? You think, if they are?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't have a huge play group here. We probably have 10 to 12 guys who play, which is good. And probably I think two of them, besides myself, have played in the leagues before, or currently are. Um, I think that, especially on the more casual type players, I think they more so just want to play in real life, or they maybe don't want to put the time or effort into learning the mod or something to that effect. It's the mod is great and they've done a wonderful job, but you still gotta, get Tabletop Simulator, download it, learn it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it takes some time. So yeah, I mean, it certainly hasn't like caught on big for my in real life group of playing. But I'll be honest, here in Dallas, we don't have a super competitive group. Um, most of us, just they just want to play casual. They just want to play fun lists. They want to paint. We have, at
Mm,
least half of our group are
mm.
big hobbyers. So they really care more about that side of the game than they do, the cutthroat competitive, get your fix in and get your practice games in.
Hmm. And it sounds like they're also not as isolated, so they can actually get around to get real games in.
Yeah, well, in Dallas, you're pretty much 30 minutes away from everywhere. So, every game store is 30 minutes away. And so, yeah, people don't really have, we're used to driving here in Dallas, Texas. So, I mean, it's not nothing for us to jump on the highway and 20 or 30 minutes later be at the store.
Right. Okay. Big shout out. You mentioned about how slick the mod is. I do want to give credit to the great people behind the scenes there. They're Carefree Llama, uh, Versen, and Zayton. These guys have been amazing. They've already started putting in the new crises that just came out, and have just kind of polished the mod nonstop. So thank you guys for that. Shameless plug for me as well. If you want to learn how to play it on my YouTube channel, the pinned video is a tutorial about how to actually get started on the mod itself. Not how to learn to play, a little bit about how to learn to play, but more about how to use the mod. So I direct you to that if you're getting started and want a good point. Okay, let's get into the meat of the episode. And so the question it's two questions I'm gonna gang together because they might be related. And Mike, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to go to you first because you and your podcast have had a lot to say about this. So let's have you have the opening word. So the question is should the league's format be changed? Now, currently it is 6 weeks of Swiss play. And so this is, what you'd presume is useful for everyone. As the Swiss leagues go on, the more competitive players will be playing each other, and the more casual people will be in their own kind of brackets. And so finding people of their own skill level, and so that theoretically having an enjoyable game as a result, as opposed to getting smashed. So that's 6 weeks of Swiss. People who are X and 1 then can be qualified for a elimination round. So this is 5 weeks of play where basically everybody who qualified has to win each game until you get to just one winner who is considered then the winner of that season. In the past, we used to have locked rosters at the beginning of the Swiss rounds, and halfway through them, you could make one switch, and then you could switch again at the elimination round. So basically, you would have to play 3 rounds of the same list or roster, 3 rounds of the same roster again, and then if you're in the elimination round, you'd be playing the same a third roster potentially for the entire elimination round. We trialed now this past season open rosters, so you literally can take anything from week to week and didn't have to reveal it to your opponent ahead of time. So with those two stipulations, the amount of weeks involved and whether roster should be locked or not, Mike, what do you think 2023 should look like?
So the league is very long. If you make it deep into cuts, it can be like multiple months, like 3 months, and you're just like, in the past with the locked rosters, you felt an obligation to practice against your opponent's list. I know people have done that against me. I've done it against people, and the times that I was really vigilant about that, I did better in the league. When I stopped like running practice games, I was losing. Uh, so because you have to compete against people who are doing that to you. So it created a massive time sink, and I just kind of got bored of grinding games, which led me to the real life events where you can't do that. But now that the league doesn't have a lock list, I think it fixes all those problems, and I think the people who are used to the hyper practice environment probably just need to adjust their expectations a little bit and get used to how the game is played in real life. Um, I think it's been a net positive. Like I said, the content creators have a little bit of a challenge to be excited about the league for the listeners, I would say. Um, as far as what if I would make any changes to the league, I'm not quite sure. Think it's I think it does everything that I would want it to do now. I'm not sure how you would fix the length of it unless you were to just like shrink the cut size.
Right.
Because
Well,
I love the XN1 part of it.
because
Because
you
like
gives you
getting sorry, one last thing because it avoids like getting screwed over by strength of schedule like you do in real life events sometimes. I think is really awesome.
Well, one of the ideas, though, sorry to interrupt you, but one of the ideas was to not have X and one at all. You simply had to win your bracket to be able to go into the
Okay.
elimination rounds. But that got voted on earlier before this survey, and is not desirable. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think people get excited. Like a lot of people's metric for their success in a season is did I make cut? And when you reduce that to just people who go 6-0, it becomes much harder to achieve.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are just like, oh well, no, I'm never gonna make cut.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. One last question for you, because you go to a lot of real life events, and you mentioned how this is more like the normal tournaments, and I agree because when you rock up to a tournament, you don't know what people have brought. But one question I had for you is, over time in a tournament, particularly a big one, which is going to go 5 rounds, 6 rounds, potentially over 2 days, do you start scouting around and trying to find what the other people are playing and start to learn those rosters a bit, or is that, and therefore that it isn't quite the same as having open rosters in the TTS leagues?
Um, no, it's definitely not the same as having a completely open list where I have days to like play with my buddy and like
Right.
run their list. Because I helped Lucas in the season prior to this one, and him and I sat down for like his last 2 or 3 games in the cut, and we found things that we would not have found otherwise with like matchups and such, um, just by looking at somebody's list and like putting squads together.
All right.
And like the degree of that could be something like, Nick kind of popularized like the legacy virus thing, and Lucas and I figured out that if you just play one less character, you have priority and you can smash the character who's trying to steal from you. That's not something I would have found in a real life event, at least not without luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's definitely, but I mean, as far as real life events, I'll look at people's lists after they're published, and I'll do like some quick like just think about squad building and stuff like that, but nothing to the degree that I have done in the league.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. All right, Liam, let's go to you. Maybe you could draw on some of your Age of Sigmar competitive experience as well. How do you feel the setup of the league is now, and where would you like to change it, if at all?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Mike on. I think it's agreeable. The length is sometimes quite hard on you if you're in it for a longer time. Like you say, if you make it to cuts, and like you said, I think this league was probably the worst one because 8 finished, and then I think there was a 2-week gap, and we just jumped straight into 9. I think that's probably where the strength change would be, was the gap between them.
Mhm.
I agree with the list lock being gone. I dislike the list lock. Like it says, I don't have to. I never practice for any of my games when I was playing on that sort of side. Even in the cuts, I would just look at someone's roster and sort of like kind of work out in my head, sort of thing, just before it.
Yeah.
But I think the list lock as well, as it's even proven here in the cuts this season, with Mal's nerf last week.
Yeah.
If we were list locked, we'd be then stuck just playing Mal continuously for another 3 weeks.
It's
where he's stronger form, would you say?
Yeah.
And then a lot of people lose that kind of happened when I was watching some of the earlier cuts and stuff, and that when you watch it and then there's been like an errata, but the errata is not getting played, the game's result kind of isn't the same. Like obviously if you were playing with the new version, I feel, but on like the same with the Age of Sigmar side, like you would again, for like events, you'd normally drop your list. You wouldn't drop lists on the day often. We would always be list locked a week before the event. The lists would all be revealed, and you could look at them all to obviously make sure no one's got an illegal list and things like that. But it's obviously a different sort of kettle of fish of the size of, you wouldn't be able to go practice against every other list. You would just look at like the top players and what their lists are, and then see if there's anything you can cope with there. But yeah, no, I definitely think on the length is, I think it's fine, like the 6 weeks to then 5, unless you dropped it a week off and it was then 5 and O's and 4 and 1s. But again, there's that more. That's technically more players that would be
locked out. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Nate, what kind of a format would draw you back into the leagues?
Oh man, that's a tough question.
Pricey shakeup.
One of the things
Agent Venom.
is,
Yes, good,
I mean,
both good answers.
that's going to be a big one. I'm not going to lie. One of the things for me that I would love to see is some way to make it not as time consuming. And from what I have heard, not just here, but kind of universally, is by unlocking the list, there's not nearly as many hours as people have typically been putting into it, which is kind of awesome to hear. And because there aren't as strong of a need for those practice reps and stuff like that. So that's an exciting facet. As for kind of some of the other questions surrounding this, I wouldn't mind if I don't know if there's been discussion or really attempts to try to say like, hey, here is a at the same time that a more competitive, the typical TTS league starts, having one that's a little bit more dedicated to uh, casual players. I know that for those who are running the leagues, that's running 2 separate events and has all sorts of additional complications, but then it kind of weeds out those first 2 rounds that can be negative experiences of a more casual player getting stomped by somebody who has a well-tuned machine versus something that's a little bit more fluffy as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we'll go to Sooner then. You've been in a few evolutions of the league, back when it was just a normal tournament, basically, 32 players. What do you think should change?
I very much agree with basically what Mike and Liam have said. I, as someone who I've played 8 seasons, I think I've played in cuts 5 or 6 of those 8 seasons. It's just really long, and by the time you get to top 8, top 4, I mean, I really don't have a whole lot of interest in even playing my list. Because at this point I'm trying on to new things. And I mean, some of it is just personal preference, right? I like to play a lot of new things. I don't like to stay on one thing for a really long time. I like the in real life kind of, you just show up, you play for 2 or 3 days, you play that list, and you don't get to see other people's lists. And it just, I think that's a lot more fun in my effect than uh, I I really dislike the, somebody sees your list a week early and they put in 12 games against your list. I think it evens out the playing field a little bit more whenever you can't do that. I think that I don't, I have 2 young children. I can't just sit here and grind games, grind games out, all the time to see what my opponent's list is. So I think it almost gives an unfair advantage. And I think you've seen a lot of people who have been very successful in this league. They do that, and all power to them. I mean, I think it's great, and they deserve the success they've had because they've put in the time and effort. But I think when you take away list locks, you take away seeing their list. I think it makes the league feel more like a convention or an in real life tournament, and I think that's a good thing. That's kind of my standard. That's why I play the game, is for these conventions and these tournaments.
Yeah.
And so anything we can do to make it feel more like that, I think is a net positive, in my opinion.
Yeah. So one of the things that it was on Strike Better, they mentioned that they would really like to see people report their games, like putting all the stats into Longshanks, and also maybe even print their lists somewhere. The issue from a TO perspective is that it's hard for us to kind of chase people all the time to put in that information. And then there's the aspect of the competitive players not wanting to put that information in to keep it as open as possible. You know, in other words, if there's some clue of what you've been playing for the last 3-4 weeks, that might give somebody else a leg up on you compared to if you just left all the Longshanks information blank, aside from what the score was. Who would like to address this conundrum?
I'll go because I've been talking, so I'll keep going. I mean, I think that would be fine. I wouldn't have any problem with that. I think uh, because you have the option to change things up. So yeah, my opponent may see that I've been playing, Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, it's on me to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and play Brotherhood, this week against him and completely, throw it for a curveball. So I think that would be completely fine. I think it would be, a nightmare for the TOs. You're just going to be chasing people left and right because uh, our community is fantastic, but they're not always the most responsible on getting stuff in, like getting the rosters in and things like that. So it might be a lot of chasing for the TOs, but I think the data would be good. And I mean, as a competitive player, I would be totally fine with it.
Yeah. Who else has a thought about this, about the data?
Yeah,
I guess my question is that even possible on Longshanks if you're doing the league within a certain event? I know you could have a list for the entirety of the league, but from game to game, you can only report affiliation, threat level, and stuff like that, right?
Right, correct. So it would, so like a minimum data reporting feature would be to make sure that every game had the Longshanks data filled in. A
Mhm.
step further would be to have some other tool where people would paste in their lists so people could see it over time. But that would be yet another step of effort.
Yeah, I think the level of Longshanks would be a pretty happy place for that to be, where you say, hey, this is I played Sam Vengers or I played Guardians of the Galaxy. But I know that I would be terrible about submitting a full list to a separate place from Longshanks, and it's just an additional hurdle that would be uh, a hindrance than probably helpful in the long run.
so it
Liam,
also then,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, and it would also be then if the information you gave was correct. Because well, again, that was a talk. Like I looked, obviously, like after when we went into cuts, certain people hadn't even put an affiliation into their, like they just left it as blank. So were they doing that on purpose to hide what they were playing that league, or did they just not do it? It's obviously, and then it's more work on your guys' side that you already have enough to do. Of, like you say, herding cats is the common one for trying to get everyone to do the information that you ask, and you see the messages, chasing up matches and things like that. Like that's
Yeah.
even further if you had to literally go through every game in Longshanks and go, these 12 games don't have an affiliation or an threat level that's set.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, what it comes down to is having the bracket TOs chase people to put the information in, and what ends up happening is that even if just one person doesn't, then you don't want to draw the round potentially, and so I guess we could draw it and put that information in later, but it gets harder. But maybe that's something that we could do is we don't. I guess as long as they actually report the results, you can then draw the next round, but then retrospectively put in the other kinds of data in there.
even onto yourselves then, the content creators, like you could keep your own in a spreadsheet sort of thing, like what you played, what they played,
Mm.
almost like a diary sort of thing, and like say soon on that obviously I don't know if you don't really do the reports on your podcast as much, that sort of stuff. Obviously I know House Party Protocol used to do that. They would do their weekly talk about the game before they had it. Then they would have the game and they would talk about it, sort of thing. You could have that sort of information that people post out, put it on the blogs and things like that. Like, oh, this is what I played. This is what I felt the meta I was going into. So I added this. Then week 2, if you've changed your list, you say why you've changed your list, and it's obviously opening people's minds as well to why changes happen.
Anybody? What about, if I could get a commitment from? Do you think that? Let me restate that.
Well,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have some ideas, Norbert,
Yeah.
that
Go
might answer
ahead,
your
please.
question. So the easy one is that talk of like, because you guys are referring to like players submitting their squads, right? Like they play the game and then they submit to Longshanks like what they played in that game, which is a subset of their list, right? So I've heard from Red Sam, who's the developer on Longshanks, that is an awful idea, because what happens in application is people like just all it takes is for people just to submit things wrong. It could be as easy as like, oh, I clicked Ghost Spider instead of Ghost Rider, right?
Yep, sure.
And then all of a sudden the whole data set is useless because you can't trust it, right? So it's like, why even do it? So I don't think that's a great avenue to deal with. Now I do think this problem where the players are like, okay, I'm not going to submit my affiliation or my leader on Longshanks for the game to hide it. I think Longshanks currently doesn't require your opponent, or it only requires one player to submit the game, and then there's no like your opponent or the other person has to be like, yes, this information's correct. Longshanks maybe could develop something like that, and that way, you're not going to play your previous opponent again. So it's like, well, like submit your leader, dude. Like, like the players can kind of maybe enforce themselves.
Yeah, I found that odd about Longshanks. Of all the wonderful things about it is that it doesn't have a confirmation feature. And with TTO, our previous software, it was a bit annoying because unless the free form text box was exactly the same as what you put in, like what your player put in, what you put in, it would say that it was not the same. And so it would flag it to me as a TO. Whereas Longshanks, everything is in drop-down boxes. So it could be quite good for one player to actually put all the information in and then click it, and then the other person has to review it and say, it's confirmed. It'd be a lot. I don't think it'd be that hard, but it'd be up to Sam to program that in.
Yeah, they're very. He's very, active
Yeah.
on adding features that make sense to Longshanks. So
Yeah. Nate, you're a content creator. Would you actually use this data if we were to start chasing the players to make sure the Longshanks stuff was filled out each game?
Unfortunately, I am a terrible person to ask because I have never really covered the TTS League stuff. So my default answer would be probably not. However, at least on YouTube, we do talk about league stuff on Gamers Guild, so there it probably would get used.
Okay. What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean, we would talk about it on Gamers Guild, but we don't go into the huge breakdown that a lot of the podcasts do. I mean, we certainly will talk about, the top characters, why they're being picked, the bottom characters, why they're being picked, what affiliations are good or being picked a lot. But yeah, I mean, we don't do like a huge dive into it, like Jacob does or anything like that. But I mean, data's good, right? Like it's fun to have the data. For me, I don't know if the data outweighs all the other positives that is, not list lock. But I mean, I think again, Longshanks has come a long way, and I think they just submitting your games in Longshanks gives us a lot of data that is very helpful. And so, I mean, is that enough? I don't know, but I mean, it's certainly you got to weigh, what's more positive,
Yeah.
data versus the not list lock.
Just a quick plug, there's a pinned link now to our survey. Everybody's welcome to that survey, and part of it is about how to report games, and is an open text box for people to put in their thoughts about collecting that data. Okay, some people in the chat have been actually mentioning about how intense the leagues were, in part because of how many there were. And so in the past, we've had typically 3 leagues each year. We tend to try to space them out apart. This year, season 8 and 9 got crunched together a little bit too much, unfortunately. But if you consider that we stick to the same format, which is 6 weeks of Swiss, 5 weeks of elimination rounds, let's just call it 6. Let's say there's like a week break between Swiss and elimination round. That gives us 12 weeks, which is essentially 3 months. Okay, 3 months. That means if you did 3 leagues, that's 9 months. So you could have maybe a month between each one, essentially, or maybe a bit longer break in certain instances to avoid Christmas holidays and maybe August time frame. So with that in mind, is this too many seasons each year, or is it just right, or should we have more?
I'll get started. I feel like the like go with the last person that talked and like back around seems
Sure.
to be working.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this year was just unlucky timing because I know at the beginning of the year we were waiting for LVO to finish, and then they started that season, and then after that it was the rotation that AMG threw a wrench and everything, which stalled that season.
Yep.
And then it got super late, and it's like, well, do you want to have 3, even though it's going to run into Christmas? And people voted for it, so here we are.
Yep.
But last year, I think the timing was just right. Now, I do remember that people who don't make cuts were actually asking, when's the next league starting?
Yeah.
Because the time between them was so long, right?
Right.
It was only the players that made it to like top 8 and farther that are like, can I please get a break? Like, I've been grinding games for 3 months and I've been playing the same list and I want to play something new.
Yes.
So I think the 3 leagues is fine, but maybe some more side events that engage people who don't make the cuts. Now the Splendens did that, and I really like the idea of the person who goes undefeated and Splendens makes cut next season. I think we should keep doing that.
Oh, you like that idea. Okay, so for people to understand, during the elimination rounds, we tend to run something called the Beta Splendens League. They've been many times experimental leagues, or they just have fun rule type of things. It's basically for everybody else to have a goof while the competitive players are battling it out in the elimination rounds. But last season, we also tried a Beta Splendens League where essentially it was made more competitive because the person who won that particular short league, only 4 weeks, they had an automatic spot in the elimination rounds for the following season. So, Mike, as a competitive player, I can see why you would like that.
Well, I think it incentivizes participation. Everyone has some degree of competitiveness to them. We like to have like this binary thing of like casual competitive, and you're only in one classification. But the reality is, everyone's on a spectrum of some sort where like your taste for competitiveness is maybe less than somebody else. And it's kind of just up to our community to, cater to your opponent's competitiveness levels, if you will. Compromise is maybe a better word. You don't want to just be like, all right, I'm gonna just like voodoo the crap out of you, and it's like, bro, I'm playing like normal stuff. I don't really want to get this like NPE, So, it's good to just be real with your opponent and have like good social contract, if you will, which is not always easy for some individuals.
All right, Sooner, you said you're time strapped. How does 3 seasons a year sound to you?
I think 3 seasons is fine. I think, like Mike said, I think last year was just kind of a bad timing. I think that if you do 3 seasons, I think that you got to just start on, make sure it's timely and starts on time, whether AMG is looking to do an update or not. And I think you just make an announcement that says, hey, the league this is 3 months long. There may be changes. AMG may release new crisis, and then we're going to start playing with the new crisis or something to that effect. Because the last thing you want is, you're in week 2 and they put out all new crisis. I don't want to keep playing the rest of the league with all these old, outdated crisis. So, I know last year, there were a lot of setbacks because we were waiting on this or waiting on that. I think you just start the league, get it on the time frame, and then if you need to adjust. And look, some people are going to be upset. That's the nature of having a 250 person league. You can't please everybody. But I think that 3 seasons is fine. And to Mike's point, like, yes, I complain about the long seasons, but those are just when I had 2 or 3 seasons where I went deep into the cuts. Like, you can't just take one competitive player who's like, yeah, I need a break when 220 people are like, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like that person just needs to suck it up, and if they want to play in the league, they just don't take a break, and if they don't, then take a season off, like I did this season.
Yeah. I totally.
Is that a humble brag, Sooner?
Maybe, but I'm just saying, like, you can't just you got to put a perspective of all the players, not just the select few who are consistently, the Morgan Reeds, the Pat Dunfords, who are consistently making top 16, top 8. Yeah, they probably want a break. Well, maybe they should lose a game. So
Well, look, I can tell you all. I'll let you all put your thoughts in, but from the start, at least when I became a TO for the thing, the start has always been to try to balance this for everybody around the world to enjoy as much as possible. And getting that balance right is tricky for the reasons that you just said. But that's always been our goal, is to have something for everybody, just the ordinary players, and then something that is going to entice the more highly competitive type players to come there. And so we're trying to strike that balance. Liam, how do you think we've been doing in that regard?
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
But it's the same idea. For you message any of the accusers or yourself, you'll get an answer within a day. Obviously, if you're personal life and things like that, but you'll always get a response from someone that will answer your queries. Or, like you say, I was thinking as well on that. Like, you're talking about doing 3 a year. What about actually just calendaring them in at the start of the year, going,
I think so.
February, this is going to happen.
Yep.
June, this one, and then the last one happens.
Yeah.
You try your best not to change their dates, but the same idea when people are asking, "Oh, when's the next one?" You're like, "Calendar's there."
Yeah.
Definitely, because you do get that question a lot. And also now with your no list lock, I'm assuming people can just jump in.
Yeah.
Like, after week 2, because obviously then they don't just go 5-0 if they just dodged a game. I
Yeah.
don't know what your
That's
thoughts are
right.
on that.
That's how we did it this year. Is that you can't join in the middle of a bracket, mostly because Longshanks locks it up basically once you draw it. Okay, but after that one round is over, we can add people in, and you do need basically to have what is it? 3 times 5, 15 points, 15 tournament points. Yep. So if you miss the first week or a week, let's say the first week, if you win all 5 after that, you're good. Because essentially technically lost the first one, even though you didn't really play.
Yeah, and that's obviously now as well. Like, obviously, when we're previously doing list locks, folk were stuck for 3 weeks not being able to join in, which obviously was then more limiting for you to grow that number that you had there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful to hear that a lot of people have found the open roster is very helpful, because it certainly helps from the TO perspective. We wouldn't be waiting for LV.
Best change this season, I'd say.
Say again?
I'd say the best change they did this season. Definitely. Because I'll even put my hands up. I've only changed like 2 things on my list over the 6 weeks that I was in normal lists. Like, you don't have to change. It's obviously just your opportunity. If the same idea for if you went in week 1 going, like that's what happened the season 6 I started. You played something. I was like, Dormammu's cool. I'll play all this cool models with Dormammu. Turns out you need a bit more synergy than just throwing Dormammu and all these models that just have cool models. And then, like you say, then you're locked into that for 3 weeks. You're playing that maybe bad honed list, or bad list that you chose to, or list that isn't very synergized, and you feel worse because you're playing something that's not able to compete. But obviously with no list lock, you can just go, that didn't work, back to square one.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here real quick. I think, to your point, most people will play their same like affiliation leader play style, even with the fluid lists. And it usually comes down to like maybe the last third of the list that's dedicated to tuning it to like a meta per se. And that is learned over the course of playing a bunch of games, which, the league is a bunch of games. So that helps when you're locked into like your tuning slots. It feels bad. You're like, oh, this character just didn't work out. Like my 10th character, I just want to change it. And that's what it does. And I mean, I say this, and maybe the next step for competitiveness in the league is people to grind a bunch of affiliations and have them on their bench. and have like 5 different lists and just be able to drop something into somebody. You're not like a dedicated Web Warriors player. Maybe you have like Guardians, Avengers, Webs, Brotherhood all in the wings, and you're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna Swiss Army knife somebody. I don't know.
Totally.
I also think the no list lock is best for casual players.
Yeah.
I mean, you got guys who have only played 5 or 10 games. They don't want to be locked into it. I mean, they're just learning the game. They're just learning the characters. So they may want to play a different list or affiliation every single week just to learn the game. So I think casual players are going to, much prefer a not list lock.
I can tell you from a TO perspective, list locks, not having list locks has been a godsend because of the fact that we can adapt to changes much more quickly than we have in the past. Malekith changes came, and we said, all right, finish the current round, which was about halfway through, and then next, to keep it fair for everybody, and then the next round we had the new Malekith. But we didn't do it for the crises, for instance. We felt that the crises were too new and too radically changed, and there's only a handful of people still playing, so we wanted to let that ride out, and so we did it that way. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. All right, keeping in mind, we're going to be wrapping up now. I'd like everybody here to have a chance to tell us a bit about what they'd like to see the leagues look like next year. And also, if you could, when should we start them? Keeping in mind that Las Vegas Open is the last weekend of January, but we're trying to, let's say, get 3 leagues in again in 2023. Mike, should we start with you again?
Yeah, we could do that. I think you probably just start as soon as people are ready. Maybe waiting for LVO is not the right call. I think people were probably waiting to see like what the meta was before going to the league. I know there was some releases around that time, right? Like Juggernaut that people were waiting for that weren't out yet. So I say we just as soon as people want to get started, let's just do it. And LVO meta is what it is. I wouldn't try to worry about one influencing the other.
Yeah.
Especially with no list lock, you can't influence it, right? Like, I could play in the league and not play my LVO lists, and I don't have to report anything.
So we'll just all private message you and take your list, Mike. That's how it works.
Yeah. I was that's the list I had for LVO prior. I was not going to tell anybody about until the event.
Yeah. What was on your wish list then for the leagues, or are you basically happy the way we're going now so far?
I love the way the league is now. I mean, when you're trying to accommodate like a million different time zones, you can't just like do a 1-day event. So the compromise is do an event every week, or a game every week, which is what it does. And I think everything works out great. I mean, I think any complaining we hear now, a lot of it is probably just from burnout and like fatigue around the holidays. People should probably just exercise their ability to not take a league off. I've been very happy that I took one off. I've been traveling around. I've been busy with other things, and I'm excited to get back especially with these new crises and stuff. So
good.
I'll be back. So if you're feeling burnt out, just don't participate. Like nobody's forcing you.
Yeah. Or when you get FOMO, you can jump in now a week late or a week 2 weeks late.
There you go.
Sooner, are you going to LVO, and what are your wish lists for the league next year?
I am going to LVO. I'm very excited, more so just to hang out with the community. It's going to be, like all the community is going to be there, or not all of them, obviously, you guys in Europe and the global, but the US community, it's going to be, majority of people are going to be there. So I'm really excited about that. I think the league is great. I mean, the only one thing which I don't even know is possible, I would say, is if you could shorten it a little bit, it would be nice, but I just don't know if it's possible because I would much rather have all the X and ones get in and it be at the current length it is than shortening it and making it where only like 4 or 8 people get in cuts. So I'm really happy with it. I think the list lock change was great. I think that really opened up the league, and I think that season 9 was just not as participated in. I took the season off. I've been meaning to take a couple seasons off, and it just kind of came down to, like you said, FOMO. I just wouldn't do it. And then finally, I just took the season off. But I mean, with the way the league is now, I mean, I'm sure I'll be back in next season. So I think it's running, and the changes were very good.
Okay. All right, Nate.
I would say, I would say, I would make sure there's like a month in between
Yeah.
each season.
Yeah.
Because if you're starting 2 weeks or something like that, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. And when should we start? Should we delay the start or just work
I
around?
would not.
Yeah.
I would not. So if I was a TTS TO, I would not delay anything for AMG or for in real life events. Those are their own thing. I would let those be their own thing, and I would not delay at all for any of those.
Very encouraging.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Nate, what are we going to do to entice you back in? Come on, buddy.
Would love the idea of a set schedule. With just being able to say from January 1st, these are the 3 league start dates, and then you're able to just adapt from week to week, like you're already talking about, would be really nice because you then get some guaranteed built-in breaks, and that way you don't have to worry about LVO or Adepticon or Warfare Weekend or any of the other big cons that are out there and stuff. So I think that's a huge leap in the right direction, and the open lists allow that to work very easily. I think the only thing that kind of reasonably pops into my mind for shortening the league, which I don't think would be a terrible idea, is to extend the Swiss one more week. And it would basically cut the top cut in half, I think. You still just let any X and ones participate, but it makes it so that there is less of a break for the crowd that don't make it into top cuts, while still having those top cut games be still very intense.
That's interesting. Liam, I'll have your thoughts, but I'd like you to maybe have the group also comment on this. Dizzard here, one of the founders of the league, how you is it Dizzard, was suggesting a month-to-month tournament that the winner of each one then qualifies for a December eliminations round, or let's say end of year eliminations round.
So like a Masters event more than
I guess
of almost that's what, like for me, like Age of Sigmar, like all the events in a year for Scotland, you would play in them, you get a certain amount of points for your position, and then the end of the year, top 16 players would get to play at that peak event. Then whoever wins that's the master for that year,
right?
Is what we would come from previously.
Okay.
Even the 40K and things like that as well.
Yeah, which is kind of like the LVO model, if I think.
Yeah, well, I suppose your invitational sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So what do you?
Yeah, LVO does this. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about it for Global League, though?
I would prefer the way the league is probably over that. I mean, I think that circuit is really good for in real life events, but I don't know if it would translate as well for an online deal. So I don't know. I think I would probably prefer leagues, but who knows? It might be.
I agree. I think
awesome.
I think I like the league better. That kind of style for a real life makes sense because you want to drive people to travel, and there's no traveling on TTS, so
yeah,
you might as well just get more games in, right?
You could also just be, if you're doing an event every month and say, I don't know if you're going to limit it to smaller groups of people, but you could end up playing the same, maybe 2 people every month.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could have real life events anyway, but you could just end up like me and Mike. Well, say it was just World Bracket then. Me and Mike plays round 1 the first month. I play him round 2 the second month. Round 3 the next month. You'd end up just meeting each other all the time. If that's then something that you wanted to avoid, rather than you get, like right now, you get to play 6 different people. Then you might be lucky enough to play, if you go cuts, 4 or 5 different people.
Yeah, and from different brackets.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Go ahead, Sooner.
Also, let me jump in real quick. The biggest draw for me personally about TTS League is the fact that I can put my kids to bed and then stroll over to my couch, turn on the computer, and get a game of MCP in. I can't make it to the local gaming store as much as I would like and things like that. So the biggest draw for me is just the accessibility, just to get that game in, schedule it, tell my wife, hey, Wednesday night I got a game, and it's just easy to do, and the ease of it is just the biggest draw for me.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest driver for keeping this TTS alive even outside of the pandemic. I mean, just suits a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, as we've discussed. I think I'm going to leave it there because we're just after the hour mark. I want to encourage everybody who's listening to this to take the survey. I'll make sure that the link is in the notes, show notes and things. Take the survey. It is closing a week from today, which is the 10th, so it'll be closing on the let's say 17th, and we'll collate that information over the Christmas break and then decide how to do it. And we'll make an announcement, and I agree with you guys. We're going to try to definitely schedule stuff in advance so people can already make their plans and things like that. So do take that survey to help us understand what the community wants, because we're only doing this to make everybody happy, not to do it. Doesn't, I haven't been able to buy my yacht yet with this somehow.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Norbert and the other TOs who put this on. Man, they don't get paid. They do this in their own volunteer free time. So big thank you to you, Norbert, and the rest of the volunteers. I mean, you guys are the lifeblood, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. I've mentioned the programmers who were on the thing, but in the mod, I'll mention the other people who do all the hard work with me on TOing it behind the scenes. That's Merzane for the East bracket, Sam Finger Guns for the West bracket, Wargaming Dad, I think, was taking care of the Central bracket in addition to the European one. We have Jonah. He took a bit of a break this particular season, but he's been helping all year for the European bracket. And then, of course, we have AJP2, who's been running the Oceania bracket. So thanks to all those guys, and I appreciate you guys mentioning it. So let me thank you all in turn. Mike DeLuca for getting up so early. So wonderful. Hear him on the Danger Room. Hopefully he'll have some follow-up thoughts on this week's episode from this, so thank you for that. Sooner 5 is here. He's now on the Gamers Guild. Thank you so much from the Central region and the East region. Nate, in particular, for struggling through your hangover. You can find him on the Gamers Guild on YouTube. Thank you so much. And lastly, Liam, all the way up in Scotland. Apparently podcasting about another game, but okay, that's fine.
Fair, obviously. It's just the way it is.
I thank you all, and I hope everybody enjoyed the stream. I certainly did, and I hope to see you all early in January for Season 10 of the MCP TTS Leagues.